Well, Lohan, thanks for tuning in here to Spotlight Now on Hawaii News Now. We have a few guests that will be joining us in just a little bit to talk about the insurance crisis that's happening in the state and how Hawaii lawmakers this legislative session have tried to take measures to address that. We're going to get to that in just a few moments. But of course, we'd like to always encourage those of you who are watching both on air and online to involve yourselves in the conversation. You can add your question and comments for our guests on Facebook in the comments section.
And of course, just yesterday, the governor signing major legislation to improve the insurance market here in Hawaii. And that's why we have invited Senator Jarrett Keohokalole from Kailua and Kaneohe to join us today, one of the key players in this bill. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Now, before we get to insurance, which really is the lion's share of our conversation today, I want to go right off the top with the little tease that I gave there at the beginning. You are considering a change in your political future. Tell us about that.
That's right. Yeah, thank you. You know, over the past few months, I've been talking a lot with my family, with a lot of our leaders in the community, and with a lot of my constituents who are really frustrated and really disturbed about what's happening in Washington. I think the thing that motivates me the most is just seeing the cruelty of all of it. You know, the passage of this big mega bill that just took place over the weekend is going to have really hard and painful consequences for us here in Hawaii that I think people are only beginning to understand and are not going to be happy about when they see it. So, you know, I think one of the questions we've been asking is, you know, are we getting the representation that really represents the values of residents in our community? Are we getting the best we can out of our representation in Washington with everything that's going on, with all the chaos? And is it time for a change? Is it time for someone else to take a turn? So I'm seriously considering entering the race for Hawaii Congressional District 1.
And that seat, of course, now occupied by Congressman Ed Case, who has been in this seat for some time, a fellow Democrat. Just your thoughts overall about what he's done and what's maybe prompting you to enter this race, knowing that there is already a Democrat in this seat, and how you might differentiate yourself from Congressman Case.
Sure. I think, you know, Ed is a decent person, and I'm not interested in, you know, turning things into the kind of ugly, dirty combat that you see across the continent. But I do think that we have some differences of opinion on some of the main issues that you're seeing happen across the country. And again, I'm just very frustrated and disturbed by everything that's happening. You know, at the state level, we've really been hampered with a lot of the things we're trying to do in the long term to solve issues locally by these impending painful cuts to things like Medicaid and healthcare for homeless and SNAP. These are things we're going to have to deal with at the local level, and it just, I think, it makes me question whether, you know, we can do better.
When you're trying to figure out whether or not this is the right step to take, you are a dad, you have children who are still school-aged, right? And so this would be a big personal sacrifice in addition to a big political fight. When you're weighing those, weighing these decisions, what goes through your mind? How are you making this decision from a family perspective as well?
Well, certainly I have to check in with my wife, who is actually really supportive of it. You know, we got into public service to begin with to try and deal with the big issues that we know our kids are going to have to deal with. That's ever more present now with the way the tax cuts have been structured, how they're going to be delayed from a budgetary standpoint into the future, and our kids are going to have to deal with them. But I think over my time in office, I've tried to gravitate toward the big issues that are difficult to solve, that really make an impact to people. So again, you know, cutting healthcare to our most vulnerable, cutting food stamps, cutting grants to the Department of Education. I mean, I think that's really more of what it's about, is that, you know, I think now more than ever we need leadership to fight those fights, you know, in Washington. I'm not afraid to fight. I'm not afraid to stand up to bullies. And I do think I have a record of, you know, going for the big issues and digging in, trying to bring people together to get things done.
What does this timeline look like for you, and what are some of the things that you're going to need to hear during this exploratory time to really move the needle and actually have make you make that formal decision whether or not to enter this race?
Sure. So I strongly believe that people deserve a choice. I think more and more in elections in Hawaii, people aren't given a choice, and incumbents just sail through. It's even happened to me. It's convenient when you're an incumbent, but I don't think it's good for the people of Hawaii. So we're listening now. We've had people come up, and I've been grateful for their support and encouragement. And so, that's part of why I wanted to be upfront about this, that we are taking feedback, and we want to hear from people about whether this is something that people also resonate with, whether it is a discussion about our values being represented in the way that people in Hawaii, people on Oahu feel like they deserve.
And what is that deadline for you? How soon do you have to make that decision?
Soon. I mean, we're trying to be deliberate about this. We would obviously be a pretty big underdog, and so the sooner the better. We want to make sure that we're making an intentional decision. Like you said, I have family, we have kids. It's a conversation that we've been having.
Another thing that we want to talk about, and switching gears, is the potential for this special session that we've been hearing about once the legislative session ended, and as lawmakers continue to monitor what's happening here in Washington, D.C. What are you hearing about the special session? Some of the things that you folks are looking to address should that formally come to play and you guys get called back in?
The latest I've heard is that it's less likely because we're still sort of trying to unpack what happened with the passage of that mega bill. It looks like some of the most painful cuts that are being made are either going to be delayed until after the election, which I think was done by Republicans deliberately, or that it's too soon to tell and they're waiting for federal guidance. But what we do know is that we do have the potential, for example, like with the cuts to Medicaid, the big one that's going to hurt people in the community is this requirement that people on Medicaid prove that they've been working every 6 months. So if you think about a homeless person, one of the first things we do when we can get people on the street to accept help and get into shelter is we put them on Medicaid so they have health insurance, so they can get their prescriptions, so they can take care of their medical issues without having to go to the ER, swamp our ambulance and our ER capacity. If we're required to cut health insurance for those populations immediately, then we're going to be in big trouble, and we're going to have to unpack exactly, what we have to do about that. But again, I think it's too soon to tell. More than likely, when we've seen big bills come down from the federal government, it takes some time for them to really start to impact the community out here. And so we hope that those changes won't come at all, but if they do come, they'll happen when we're in session next year.
And just briefly, how big do you expect that impact to be? How many people in Hawaii do you think are going to get kicked off of their health care?
Again, it's really early to tell, but one of the projections we've just heard is that the work requirement alone could kick 30 to 50,000 people in Hawaii off of their health insurance. And so, we can have these debates about whether people need to have a work requirement for cash welfare or even for Medicaid, but the draconian way in which it was rolled out is, I think, going to have a huge and difficult impact on our community out here.
Let's get to insurance, which is why we brought you on here today, not knowing that you had some political news to share as well, and we appreciate that. The governor just yesterday signing a bill that you and Representative Matayoshi over in the House worked very hard on. Tell us a little bit about what you hope this does to stabilize insurance rates here in Hawaii.
Well, number one is I hope that it allows people in high rises who are having difficulty even getting insurance right now to get coverage. Coverage that's required by their banks, if they have a mortgage. And we're hoping that they can get it for a much cheaper price. So there are essentially three main parts to the bill. One is stabilizing the hurricane insurance industry, because that's the primary area with high-rise condominiums, townhouses, where they're struggling the most. The second piece is with the Hawaii Property Insurance Association, which is where you go if you've had multiple claims and you're finding it difficult to get homeowners insurance of any kind, single-family homes, what have you. That's going to be a little bit of a delayed implementation, but we want to have that ready in case the insurance market gets worse. And then the last piece, which we hope will be helpful to especially seniors on fixed incomes that live in these older condominium high-rises, is a loan program that allocates $20 million to go toward deferred maintenance on some of these aging buildings that are in part the reason why they're not getting full coverage or they're getting canceled.
You know, you mentioned the condo owners, and those are some of the stories that we've been hearing as we've been covering this insurance crisis that are getting hardest hit. What can you tell us about how specifically this will impact those who have seen these higher premiums, some buildings seeing cancellations, and how soon that there might be relief coming their way for these condo owners?
So I think as Sue will be better able to explain, we're having dozens of high-rise buildings already applying for insurance, and so those policies are getting approved and are starting to roll out right now. And in one example that the State Insurance Division brought up during the signing of the bill yesterday, one of the buildings that they just signed on got $85 million worth of coverage for the high-rise, and they're saving over $120,000 on their premium payment for this year. They just signed. So we know that there are about 80 high-rise buildings that have already signed up to get coverage. You know, it takes some time to get those approved and to get their premiums. So I'm hoping here in the next several weeks we'll start to see a lot more of those cases where people are already seeing the premium payments come down, and then again that they're actually getting coverage.
And to be clear, this is for buildings that have had their policies canceled. Essentially, there's nowhere else for them to go, right? This is not necessarily another carrier that people can go to sort of shop around.
Well, so there are two things going on. The first thing is that these state programs are required by law not to compete with private insurers that are regulated in Hawaii, so that we don't replace the private industry. So the target market are for condominiums and high-rise condominiums that can't get full coverage by their existing carrier. They need to have some layer of insurance, hurricane insurance coverage already to be eligible for the program. But a lot of times there's this gap, and it's a huge range in how much of the gap needs to be covered. And that's where the Hurricane Relief Fund really, we're hoping, will come in. And so far, the early response has been very good. There's a lot of demand and interest. And so we think it's working the way we wanted it to.
One of the issues that you had mentioned for condo owners, again, is that deferred maintenance and just some of the costs that is associated there. With the passing of this bill, do you think that these types of things, such as retrofitting buildings with sprinkler systems or pipes or things that may have been put off for some time, can now be addressed? How do you think that factors into just what these condo owners are looking to pay overall?
Yeah, I think it's going to help on two fronts. The first is that if your hurricane insurance premiums are going down, then that's more available money that you have to deal with things like deferred maintenance. And then the second part is the condominium loan program, which is going to take some time to set up and configure appropriately. It is a loan program, so we have to be responsible with taxpayers' money. Make sure that just like on a regular construction loan, you know, when you get the loan funds, you're actually using it for the construction that you need to do in order to get right. So that's going to take some time to roll out. We're hoping that it will be available next year, but the hurricane insurance premium, savings that we're hoping people will get should be available as soon as they get approved.
My understanding is there's also a study included in this bill to look at the long-term solutions for this issue, because obviously this is sort of triaging this immediate need and then setting up this fund that condos can borrow against that you just talked about and, do some of the maintenance that Ryan's referring to. But what do you hope comes out of that long-term study?
Just a better understanding of what's going on in the vast global, financial reinsurance market, what's happening nationally with our large insurers. It's always a moving target to determine what's happening in insurance, because buildings and homes come up for renewals every year on a rolling basis. And so often we're operating off of a lag of information that's 6 or 8 or 3 months old. And so what we know is that the increasing incidence of really catastrophic and expensive natural disasters all over the world have caused losses in the investor markets that back insurers that they weren't accounting for. And so we're seeing a rebalancing. The insurers are more and more hesitant to put their money in high-risk areas or in aging buildings that are more likely to have claims. And so we just want to make sure that we are doing everything we can to make Hawaii an attractive insurance market, and we don't go the way of Florida and California, which have really struggled to deal with their disasters and then the insurance availability thereafter.
You know, this is an issue that was discussed last legislative session, and now this legislative session, you were actually able to get something passed through. Moving forward, noting that there is going to be evolution to things, things have to be set up. You may learn some things through this process. What do you imagine moving forward in each legislative session it's going to take to continue to support this program, to grow it? What are some of the determining factors that you're going to be looking at in order to help maybe improve the bill or improve legislation for this program moving forward?
The short answer is I don't know. You know, this is the most complicated bill I've ever worked on. I think that's part of why it took 2 years to bring it together. We're hoping that that long-term study will shed some light on what we need to do. When you have large bills that allocate, significant sums of money like this one, you're always going to make changes because, the real information comes when you start to implement the program. We were hoping and confident that people would be interested enough that they would sign up right away, and so they have. Now the HPIA piece comes in second. We hope that'll happen by the end of the year, and then the loan program thereafter. If it works really well, then there won't be enough state funding to accommodate everyone who needs help, and then we'd have to come in and supplement it, or at least have those discussions. So that would be a good problem. We're prepared for whatever changes might need to happen.
I'm curious, we've talked about this bill and this issue mainly in the context of condos. But we do know that homeowners are also facing rising insurance costs. Is the expectation, and we know Savio is going to be joining us on the other side of the break, and she, of course, is the insurance expert.
Yeah.
So we'll pose the same question to her, but I'm curious about what you've been hearing in terms of what it will do to stabilize the market overall and sort of, homeowners out there saying, what about us?
Well, now I don't want to answer. She's going to have a better answer than me. I think, when you just look at what happened with the Maui wildfires last year, and again, these just increasing incidences of really terrible, catastrophic disasters, if you put yourself in the shoes of an insurer, you want to make sure you're spreading the risk that you're taking on appropriately. And that seems to be changing right now. And as those insurers and the investor markets behind them are adapting, we have to just be ready to make changes. I think fire sprinklers is a very good example. 5 years ago, those weren't an issue. Some condominium buildings undertook other types of measures to improve the safety in their buildings, and now the insurers are pretty much across the board saying, we want fire sprinklers in your high-rise buildings. So that's been very difficult and disruptive, and part of why we did the condo loan program to try to address. So, this stuff is hard, and we got to just work together and keep plugging along at it. I'm just very happy that we've had demand on the program that we put together right now. It's not every day that you pass a bill that works right away. So I think that's an exciting thing, and we want to try and make sure we keep it going.
When you when you're looking at what this issue is, it's really just try to help make Hawaii a little more appealing to these insurers. And I'm wondering, when you were going through the development process of putting and crafting this piece of legislation together, the conversations that might have been happening with some of these insurers, what were some of the things that you were hearing from them? What were they telling you in order to make Hawaii a more attractive space? And do you feel that this bill will help to match what maybe these insurers are looking for from the state and from some of these buildings?
So it's a really good question. The early returns are saying we have done well enough for things to be proceeding in the right direction. Ultimately, it was a question about whether we want to try and put in the hooks and the conditions in the program to ensure that the people who need the most help, the retired condo owners, like in Makiki, who have lived in their buildings for 30 plus years, versus going really fast and potentially opening up access to the luxury buildings, Makai of them. And so we had to sort of thread a needle on that, but I think we did a good enough job of making sure we went quickly enough that the program is underway right now, but also that we've made it clear to the reinsurers and to the insurers facilitating the program that this is for local people who live in regular size units who are really suffering with the premium increases.
I'm interested, you've been a lawmaker for some time now, and you said this is the hardest bill you've ever worked on. I mean, insurance is complicated, so I'm guessing just the complex nature of this, of the way all of this works, but curious as to why you said that. What about this made this so complicated?
This is the most complicated bill I have ever introduced and had to shepherd and take across the finish line. We put together a task force after the bill didn't proceed last year. That was the governor who stepped in and did that. And it's a good thing he did because we brought together finance people, real estate people, actuaries, insurance people like Sue to help us build a consensus on it. Sometimes when we do big bills, we don't get a consensus. And there's conflict on how the bill ends up getting passed. And then you end up with challenges along the way with implementation. This one, we ended up taking the extra year, but what we were able to do during that time is really get everybody on board and give 3, 4, 5 different opportunities for people to go, okay, are you sure? Are you sure this is the way you want it? Does everybody understand what's going on here? Okay, ready, set, go.
It sounds tough.
It is.
Well, Sue, Savio is going to be on the other side of the break. We appreciate you with that breaking news off the top. Just, for folks who are just tuning in and just a final message, steering away from insurance before we let you go, about why you're exploring this political run and any final thoughts on that.
Yeah, thank you. I think because it's important, and what I would hope to bring to Washington is the same thing I've tried to bring to the state legislature, which is urgency and energy and leadership. We definitely need leadership now up there. So thank you.
Okay, Senator Keohokalole, thank you for being here today. Sue Savio from Insurance Associates Incorporated joins us on the other side of the break to delve deeper into the issue. You're watching Spotlight now.
From the moment you wake up,
Hawaii News Now brings you the stories that impact your day.
With more on the breaking news, we go live to Casey Lund.
Ready with the push alert? I'm going live. We have an update to the breaking news we brought you this morning on Sunrise.
Okay, guys, as soon as this wraps, toss to Mahia.
And we've been covering this story all day.
Now we go live to Mahia for a new development.
Stand by for breaking news. They just captured the suspect.
That's confirmed?
Yes, sources just confirmed it.
The news you need the moment it breaks.
Here on Hawaii News Now.
First alert traffic is like always having a helpful passenger right next to you.
There's a crash up ahead in the left lane.
When we see a backup, we'll tell you live on TV.
That doesn't look too good.
And send an alert to your phone.
I'll type, you drive.
First alert traffic on TV, streaming, and on the Hawaii News Now app.
Keeping you and your ohana safe.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Wright Kalei Suji. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders. And taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
Well, aloha, welcome back. We're continuing on in our conversation about the insurance crisis in Hawaii and steps that were taken during this last legislative session and signed by Governor Green on Monday to address this issue.
And joining us now is Sue Savio, the president of Insurance Associates Incorporated. We've had you on before to talk about this issue. You are the queen of insurance, if I may say.
Well, thank you for the compliment. And I'm glad to be back.
So the last time you were on here, we delved deep into this issue, and really it felt like this is a crisis and something that we kind of don't have control over. Now with the signing of this bill, with everything that the senator laid out, how are you feeling about the insurance market in Hawaii?
Well, I think the insurance market started to get better on its own, but not as well as it's done since the HHRF came into existence. So it passed on Tuesday. We could actually start to submit applications, which we had all ready to go. And we actually have written 4 policies that have helped owners because they were now able to buy the 100% that they needed. The Fannie and Freddie are happy. They're happy because they can refinance, sell, buy, whatever the case may be, and they're in compliance. So it's been a good bill.
Do you think, I mean, long term, that this is actually going to help, in the long run? I mean, this addresses some of the needs now, but just looking at some of the changes that we've seen with this insurance market and sometimes the volatility of it, how do you think that this will help, not only now, but will it help in the long term as well?
I think it will help in the long term because I think what's going to happen, and we had it happen with a condo that had a quote for full coverage from the non-standard market. And we said, well, the HHRF is willing to offer this. They said, we'll want to keep this building, we'll match it. So if the marketplace can come down to match what the HHRF is doing, we can then spread the risk not only to the HHRF but also through other standard insurance companies. So I think it's going to be a good thing that whether it's the next wildfire, whether it's the next hurricane, that it will be there that can be resurrected if it has no use in between. But I think it's going to be something we'll use over lifetimes.
Well, that seems like the best outcome, right?
It is.
To have the private insurer then step in and say, I'll match, and then the state doesn't have to take on the cost.
Or the exposure.
Yeah,
right.
win-win.
It's a win-win for everybody, for the owner who has got the cheaper insurance, for the insurance company that's willing to match it, and then for the state who says, okay, we don't have to, the reinsurance we buy we'll use for another complex.
Okay.
And that's a good win.
And let me just, for our viewers who maybe missed the first show or who have not kept up with this, just so that folks understand why this was such a big issue. It's the price of premiums, but perhaps more importantly, there were some buildings that just couldn't get insurance at all, could not get that full coverage, which means that then if there's an owner that wants to sell, they can't get a mortgage. Can you explain that process?
Okay, so Fannie and Freddie, and our mortgage companies here sell to Fannie and Freddie, require 100% insurance replacement costs on perils, all perils, including hurricane for our state. They don't require it on an earthquake because we're not an earthquake state. So we have to have it for hurricane. So if you want to buy, sell, refinance, you can't do it without 100% coverage. You can go to the secondary market for mortgages and pay extra and higher rates and put more down, but it complicates the sale and it's not as easy. And of course you don't get to use your favorite banker. So it was very difficult for a lot of people, and they had a lot of trouble buying and selling. And the real estate market started to tank a little bit for condos, and people had to reduce their prices if they were trying to sell it. And there's not a lot of cash buyers when it comes to buying real estate in our state. So yeah, it was a crisis that was developing.
And so how do you think now that this will impact the condo market for those who are in the process of trying to sell or buy a condominium? Do you see an immediate increase or rebound of this market because something like this passes?
I think so. I had a call today from a realtor who said, you thought they were going to buy the 100% now that you've given their HHRF quote. Have they done it? I said, yes, they have. She said, oh, great. I want to put this offer in, but I was waiting because I wanted to make sure it was 100%. We've had bankers say, did they go with the 100%? We have a loan that we're working on, but we can't continue on if they don't have the 100%. So we did about 4 or 5 condos already in the HHRF. And already those people are feeling the relief of having 100%.
Wow. I mean, I think what the senator was saying about just a bill having an immediate impact, I mean, to see that, he just signed it yesterday.
Yeah, he just signed it yesterday, but we got to start to work on it last week. So because of that, we already issued, as I said, 4 to 5 policies. And I have examples because I can't remember them. I want to just explain to you and the people out there how it does work. So we had a building in Mo'iliili, local style. It was a $50.4 million building. Last year's the price was $116,000, okay, for the insurance premium, and to add on $103,000 for the hurricane. This year, HHSR's quote was $45,000 for the hurricane, okay, and so they got a savings of $66,158. That's a lot of money saved on a $50 million building. We had another one in Waikiki, and this was really cute because we sent the quote to HHRF. We have to have them sign it. It was back in our email, signed in 3 minutes by the board president. Right, he said, I'm going for this. We had quoted hurricane from the secondary market at $38,993. HHRF quote was $9,057. Now his building for $9,000 is 100% financeable. Mortgage companies are pleased, the realtors are pleased, the owners are pleased, all for $9,000 instead of $38,000. So he saved $29,936. The last, also a Waikiki condo, is a $68 million building, and their quote was $159,000 for hurricane, and HHRF came in at $85,000. So there was a savings of $74,000. So it's amazing what can be saved, and I think that's why it works right away. And you go ahead and tell the people, we can do this for you. Here was what we had. And of course, people who didn't take it, like we had someone call us that expired in May, and they did not take the hurricane. They said, well, how much for it? And we told them how much. They said, we're buying it. So it's going to affect a lot of buildings.
So this may be getting a little bit into the weeds of how this thing works, but as you're discussing this, these are those, as you just mentioned in the last example, of a policy that was expired and they were, essentially without that coverage. For those that are currently in a series or a time where they are locked in at a rate or at a price, do they have to then essentially wait till this policy expires in order to then get in? And how do you address maybe just the timeline of when some of these policies are going to expire and those who are going to reapply for this? Because I imagine that could come all around the same time.
Correct. And there will be people who are saying, gee, we bought the 100% hurricane in April. You can't cancel and rewrite it. Okay, you've got to stick with it for the year. But next year you can budget based upon an HHRF rate. And that will make a big difference for the budgeting. They'll know even for what they're going to be saving. So you're right. You cannot just go back and... But if they didn't buy it in April and they only bought the property with the $10 million, they can say, well, how much would it be if we want to buy it now for people who are going to buy and sell? And we could give them a cost for that. But yes, you cannot cancel what you have.
There's a couple of different components to this bill. Of course, there's the immediate results that we're talking about now.
Right.
There also is this loan fund for some of the repairs that we're talking about. And you have emphasized again and again in our conversations about the need to take care of your building, take care of your property. What is your hope for that loan fund?
My hope for that loan fund is that every condo that does not have sprinklers will put in sprinklers. I can't stress to them the importance of sprinklers. And when I see somebody doing a pipe replacement and not putting their sprinklers in at the same time, it's the most frustrating thing, because you can save 40% on your premium. You don't have to bust down your walls a second time around. And it's bite the bullet, people, do it. And if you can get it at a lower rate, or you can get this through the bill, and if the banks don't want to match it, fine. If the banks want to match it, then do it through the banks. I don't care which way you do it. I just want it done. And I have been pushing sprinklers, yes.
And so, overall, do you think that this will help some of these deferred maintenance costs? This is a question that I posed to the center, because now that they are going to be saving some money on this insurance side, how do you encourage those, owners, as well as just those who are head of these associations, to really prioritize that now, knowing that they can save money rather than using that money to go back to owners or to pocket it somewhere else, to really take care of these deferred maintenance costs?
Well, what I do tell, and I told my own boards this, because I am a board president on 2 condos, I have said, we're not going to reduce your maintenance fees. The extra money that we were collecting for the huge premium increase, we're going to use to put in our reserve study for some of the long-term things we need to do. And even if it's only enough to pay the interest, or to get the building permit going, or to get the engineer to do the reports, it's still money set aside that will improve our building, because we're taking care of the maintenance. Maintenance is huge with insurance companies. I saved a condo $201,000 I said, tell me what you have done to your buildings in the last 10 years. They sent me this great list. I had the quote. I gave it to the underwriter. He reduced the premium by $201,000. Maintenance is huge.
Okay, yeah, we've heard that from you again
always,
and again.
Always, I sing the same song.
I'm curious about the homeowner piece, right? Well, we asked the senator as well, that do you expect this to have an impact on the market overall? Because we know things are so interconnected. And what about homeowners who are saying, what about us? Okay, well, in 2024, most condos saw huge increases. The homeowners did not. They didn't see the effect of Lahaina until 2025, because they have to go to the insurance commission to have their rates approved. So what's happening this year, the homeowners are seeing 30, 40, 50, 60, 70% increases. So maybe you paid $2,000 for your homeowners and now it's $4,000. So they're screaming this year that this is expensive, but these are the standard market rates they got approved by the insurance commissioner. Will the HHRF help them? Not the way the bill is done right now, because you have to have that first $10 million. There's not too many homes in Hawaii insured for $10 million a layer somewhere else that you can add on the hurricane. So this is not meant for single family homes. It doesn't mean that the crisis isn't there for them, but they do have to understand that as the insurance company starts to make money off of and has less and less claims, they will have to reduce their rates, because you have to submit them every year to the insurance commissioner. He's not going to allow you to have a 50% profit. As I tell people, if you think back to COVID, some of us had our auto rates actually reduced.
Why? Because we weren't having claims. There weren't as many cars on the road. So some carriers actually had to reduce their rates. So it's a system that works. It doesn't happen instantly because Lahaina was in 23 and yet the single family homes didn't get hit until 25.
I'm just wondering, in the conversations that you're having with these insurers and these companies that are making these decisions, where Hawaii stands with some of the other things that are happening throughout the country. Because as we look and we see some of the other natural disasters that are happening, we of course know what happened in Lahaina. Is there more vulnerability for certain states, and is Hawaii included in that mix? And do you think something like this will put some of them at ease to kind of help ease some of the costs and what we're seeing on the ground here?
Most underwriters look upon Hawaii, the reinsurers look upon it as a very safe place for the most part. And let's be honest, if Lahaina had not hit, we would not be in the mess we are. Our rates would still be down because Iniki was 30 some odd years ago. We're not a hurricane state. I mean, we are, but we're not. We don't get hit often. So we are a safe place, but we are a very small marketplace. And companies don't want to actually come and work and live in Hawaii and sell. So we have a very small marketplace. And because of that, we have to rely on the reinsurers. And of course, they write worldwide. So something that does happen in America, we do get zapped with because we're part of America. But, we're doing very well as a small state.
I know there was a lot of disappointment in the first year that this didn't make it through, but the senator did say that having that full year to really dive in and get things, sort of sorted out, that this is the most complex legislation that he's ever had to shepherd through, and with good reason. I mean, it's hard to understand even being on the other side of it.
Yeah.
Do you think that year was fruitful? Do you think that was necessary?
I think it was. They have a very simple application. They have a very simple rate structure. It just takes a day to get your quote. You can go ahead and order it right away. It's a very easy process as opposed to having to, hope, pray, are they going to write it or not? You know they're going to write it. You know what the rate is. Here's the cost. Association, do you want it? You want it? Great. We'll order the policy. You can do it in a day.
Wow.
Or in 3 minutes.
I do want to bring back, something that we talked about with the senator, and that is the Hurricane Relief Fund and how that has been incorporated into this. As you mentioned, we haven't, knock on wood, haven't seen a hurricane in some time and a direct hit. How is this important to the bill overall, and how it's changing it's going to help to change this landscape with the investment back into a Hurricane Relief Fund?
It would be nice if the hurricane doesn't come for many years and the Hurricane Relief Fund reinvests the money they get into reinsurance as they write more and more. Or if the marketplace comes down to match the rates that the Hurricane Relief Fund is offering and we don't need it anymore, it can go back to sleep and it'll be ready when we do need it, if we ever need it again. So it's a great bill in that it helps now, and if it's not needed, it'll be there for the future if needed.
What do you say to the buildings that are in the circumstance that we had discussed before, people who are basically going underinsured and who say, well, we got away with it for a year or two and maybe we don't need to go to 100%?
They do need to go to it. They know they need to do it, but they are hoping to get by without having to do it. But once the price becomes affordable again, there was no question prior to the rates going sky high and the company reducing the value that they didn't have hurricane 100%. So they will go back to it. It's the board who makes the decision about insurance. They know their directors and officers policy will not protect them if there is a suit against them. So no one wants to use association money to defend yourself. So yes, they will do it.
When we had spoken to you last, I can't remember how many it was, but there were dozens of buildings that were going underinsured. How long do you expect that to remain the case? How long do you think this will take to work itself out?
Okay, that was 375 back then.
Okay, yeah, more than a dozen.
Yeah, more than a dozen. And at the end of 2024, we were probably down to right now we're down to about 170, 160 that don't have 100%. So there's 160 buildings that the HHRF can be writing. Of course, some of those who already bought it from the standard market will get a quote from HHRF on renewal and possibly join the HHRF. But yes, we're doing very well. We're down to about 160.
And you expect that to become?
I expect that to become almost minimal in another year.
Okay, because these board of directors then stand a liability concern.
They don't want the liability concern, and they are the ones that will be forced with it. I mean, I wouldn't want it. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You know, as someone who has been involved in the process of writing this piece of legislation and being involved in just the study and overall, we know that oftentimes in the legislative process, there can be a lot of negotiation, differences of opinions. I'm wondering if there's anything that was left out that you wish was included, or is this a perfect bill? Was this kind of everything that you guys could have asked for, or was there anything left on the table that maybe you would like to see added in, or future versions of it in the next legislative session that could help make this stronger?
We have already given them our wish list. We're not proud. What we would like to see is the ability to, let's say somebody's policy expires in July, or it was in April, and they want to now buy the hurricane coverage, but you have to buy a year's policy. But their policy goes from April to April. You know, we would like to be able to either cut it short or to get a short-term policy. We've already expressed this. They're going to be working on that. It's more issues. I mean, nothing's easy. Okay, that's a big thing, because then we could go back to these other carriers companies that renewed the condos that renewed in April and March, and say, hey, we can do a short-term policy that would just cover from now to March of next year. This is the cost. Are you interested in becoming 100%? I mean, it would be a relief to them, right? But we have to now buy the whole year policy, and there's no refund. So that would be a wonderful thing to happen.
It sounds like this is an ongoing conversation.
It's an ongoing conversation.
I'm interested also in the long-term study. I mean, you've studied this inside and out. Do you think that the long-term study is necessary? What information do you think lawmakers really need or can glean from that?
You know, they got all the information they need, because insurance doesn't change that much. This is an animal that's been around, lumbering around the same way for years, centuries, and we know what we have to do to insure. And so they know what is happening. They know that the market changes as catastrophes hit, as claims are paid. And so, yes, we need to just continue on fine-tuning the bill, make it a little better in certain areas, and it'll be something that'll be with us for the rest of our lives.
We know that, whether you know this or not, but a lot of our audience is a lot of realtors that tune into the show, and so I'm sure a lot are listening in right now. What would your message to those who are involved in the real estate market be? Words of encouragement or information that they can pass along to their clients, whether it be they're looking to sell or to buy, of how this could immediately impact them, and some of the tips that maybe these realtors should know in communicating this to potential buyers or sellers?
Well, realtors are great owners in themselves of condominiums, so they are involved fully, and we do get lots of emails and calls from realtors. Is this 100% insured? That's the first question. Is it 100%? Because if it is, I got a listing, it's going to be a piece of cake to sell. Oh, it's not. When does it expire? Are they going to buy 100%? So I'm telling those people who call, don't be afraid to go to the board and say, look, we want to sell our unit, but we can't sell it because it's not 100%. We really need you to consider this. And now if the policies are expiring in, July, August, September, October, close by, they should be really seriously getting their quote from HHRF, which we're giving them, so that they know how much to budget for the following year, because they're going to more than likely buy it. And so the realtors are pushing, the owners are pushing, and you can't blame them.
Well, it's so good to see you and to have you here with
you.
Good news.
Yes.
From over 300 now to 160 buildings in this gap, and I expect it to go down. Just a final word from you on the insurance market, where you think rates are going, and what you would say to owners out there. I
would say to owners out there that the rates on your condos will be going down unless you have a fire in your building or a huge water loss where the 41st floor all the way down to the lobby. I had one of those. If you don't have that type of a situation, you will see a reduction in your rates. And if you don't see a reduction, it's because something's wrong, and either it's your maintenance is very poor, and there are condos that have very poor maintenance. They don't understand the need to maintain, and that is their job, to maintain, as I tell boards. But regardless, it's going to get better.
Okay.
So just hang in there.
A high note. We'd love to end on that.
Yes.
Sue Savio, thanks so much for being here today.
You're welcome. Thanks for having me.
We'll be back with Lynn Kawano. She's got a news special tonight on an unsolved murder here in Hawaii. Stay with us. You're watching Spotlight Now. Welcome back to Spotlight Now here on Hawaii News Now. We have a preview now of a really interesting news special brought to us by Hawaii News Now's own Lynn Kawano, focusing on a murder case from 4 decades ago. This week marked 40 years since UH student Diane Suzuki disappeared. The 19-year-old Aiea high school graduate had just finished teaching a jazz dance class when she went missing. Now, it's one of the most puzzling cases here on Oahu of a missing person. Lynn Kawano joining us now to reveal all the details of this case. Lynn, it's such an interesting case, and for 40 years to go by and to still not know. Tell us who you spoke to for this documentary.
Yeah, it's not easy, right? Because it is one of the older cases that I've been able to profile. But people over the age of 50 really remember it. I know you guys are a little bit young, but I really remember it because it rocked our sense of security in the community. It was a really violent time in the 80s in Honolulu. Now, in this report, we interviewed former newspaper and television reporter Robbie Dingman. She was not only there for many of the developments, but also she would later marry Gary Diaz, the lieutenant, the homicide lieutenant in charge of the investigation. They wrote a book called Honolulu Homicide together. Suzuki's case really stood out because it happened in the middle of the day, in a public place, at the Aiea dance school where she worked. She had just finished teaching the class, so there were people around. It's just so strange, and the killer had such a small window. We're talking about a short time to commit this crime. It was just so mysterious. How could this happen, right? We always wonder about that. So that's who we really focused on in this piece, but not just her.
You know, one of the other interviews that you were able to get was, you know, the man who had been dating Diane. Was he ever a suspect in this case?
Yeah, absolutely. They talked to him, and he speaks about that. He doesn't want his face shown, as you can see. He doesn't want his name used, just because circumstances have changed over the years. But he was never a suspect. He was interviewed by police, but never a suspect. And really, he had a rock-solid alibi. He was on a military base. He's a local guy, but he was on a military base. And really, his whereabouts were accounted for that entire day. And again, she had just finished teaching this jazz class. You know, everybody's around. No one saw him at this dance studio where she went missing. But, you know, when he talks about it, it's really very sad. It clearly still affects him and still has some details as to why he's not been able to really have a long-term sustainable relationship. It affected him, and it still affects him today. It's very sad.
Wow, more than 40 years later.
Yeah.
I'm curious also, we know there was a person of interest named at the time. What happened to that?
That person of interest is still around, is still in the Pearl City area. That person was never arrested, never indicted. There were search warrants executed. That's the video that you're seeing. They are executing a search warrant right there behind that man's home. And the man we're talking about is a photographer who worked in the building. This was a person of interest. We are not naming this person, but there were multiple search warrants executed. There were some very frustrating factors, though, that happened with this investigation that we dive into in this piece. That was one of the reasons why they could not get an indictment. So we go into all of those details. It's such a frustrating case for so many people because we just wanted to see something happen. And, you know, I said, you're younger than me, so you don't really remember. But when I started driving as a teenager, my parents bought me those big suitcase cell phones. And, you know, you have to pay by the minute. So they said, don't use it unless there's an emergency. It just, our sense of security was tested in that time because of this case and because of several others. There were some violent cases against women in the 80s. We do address that as well.
You know, one of the things, as you said, this person of interest, who you're not naming in this documentary, but I'm wondering, did you reach out to him? Was there any sort of response from him when bringing this back up?
We did reach out to him. We tried to contact him by phone. When that didn't work, we went to his house. And no one came to the door, but we did leave a note, and we did get a response from him. We do have that in the piece as well, but the person is still living in that same area and has carried on for the last 40 years. So, you know, there is some frustration. You'll feel that in this piece, whether he did it or not, whether he would come forward and either clear his name or, you know, talk about some of the things that happen, because a lot of people really want to know what happened. It's been 40 years, whether or not he did it, whether or not something else happened. People just want to know.
You know, as an investigative journalist, I would imagine, I know that people pitch me stories all the time. People probably pitch you stories all the time. Why this case? Why did you choose to spend, all these resources and all this time focusing on her in particular?
Well, that's such a great question. We have done some other cases, the Dana Ireland case, Lisa Au. We've done some of these other high-profile cases, and everybody kept sending me messages saying, what about Diane Suzuki? What about Diane Suzuki? And the reason we didn't was because of all the twists and turns in the investigation. And we were trying to contact people who were involved in the case or who knew her, and because it's such an old case, it was pretty difficult. So that's what took so long, but it was always in the back of my mind. Also, Diane Suzuki went to Aiea High School. My mom was a teacher at Aiea High School, and my mom knew her. So this case was always in the back of my mind. I always wanted to do something with it. It just was taking me a long time to be able to find people who could talk about it, people who were still around. We do talk to, as well, retired Deputy Chief John McCarthy, because he was on the department at the time. So, just to find all of those people and to get them all together after all this time to talk about something so painful and so long ago, it took me a little while.
Was there anything that surprised you the most through this process of going through this? I'm sure you learn a lot whenever you dive into these things, but what was maybe something that surprised you the most when really diving deep into the story?
I was surprised at how many women were attacked in the 1980s. And while Diane Suzuki's case is separate from those, and Lisa Au's case is separate from those, there were a lot of women found dead, suspicious circumstances. We had a serial killer in Honolulu in the 80s. And when I looked back at all of these murders to just see if there's any connection or to see what was going on at that time, that was what was so surprising to me, was all of these cases remain unsolved today. No arrests or indictments or charges. And it's just really sad for all of those families out there who don't have any answers.
Yeah, well, thank you for shining a light on these violent incidences against women. Tell us how people can watch it.
Yeah, tonight on KHNL, your NBC station at 6:30 p.m. It will be on TV, but you can also catch it streaming online, hawaiinewsnow.com at 3 p.m. So we're going to actually drop it earlier online because a lot of people want to watch it when they're available, right? If you work overnight, you want to watch it earlier, you can't be in front of your TV at 6:30 p.m. Many of us are in traffic at 6:30 p.m. So we are going to drop it earlier online, and you can catch it there.
Such an important piece. I think a lot of people will be streaming from their desk
Yeah,
at
looking
work
forward to
this
it, for sure.
afternoon. Thank you so much, Lynn, for joining us.
Thank you.
Stay with us. We'll be right back.
From the moment you wake up.
Hawaii News Now brings you the stories that impact your day.
With more on the breaking news, we go live to Casey Lund.
Ready with the push alert? I'm going live.
We have an update to the breaking news we brought you this morning on Sunrise.
Okay, guys, as soon as this wraps, toss to Mahia.
And we've been covering this story all day.
Now we go live to Mahia for a new development.
Stand by for breaking news. They just captured the suspect.
That's confirmed?
Yes, sources just confirmed it.
The news you need the moment it breaks.
Here on Hawaii News Now.
Spotlight Now with Yunji Denise and Right Kalei Suchi. Connecting you with newsmakers from throughout our islands. Going in depth with Hawaii's leaders. And taking your questions live. Spotlight Now, where Hawaii comes to talk.
One interesting conversation today on Spotlight Now. Of course, we ended the conversation previewing what you can expect to see from Lynn Kawano special. Encourage everyone to tune in tonight at 6:30 on KHNL, as well as streaming at 3 o'clock. But prior to that, we had the conversation. Breaking news here that a state senator is actually looking to get into the race for Congress.
Yeah, Jarrett Keohokalole saying that he thinks that we need different leadership in the district. This is for CD1, which of course is represented right now by Congressman Ed Case. Very interesting to hear his thought process. A Democrat primarying another Democrat, something that we did not necessarily expect to see, and a pretty entrenched incumbent, but you hear there, some frustration with the leadership that he's seeing and wanting a change in Washington.
Yeah, of course, and one of the things that the senator has worked on, of course, is this insurance bill that we talked about for the majority of the show, and really seeing firsthand how it's already making an impact. We also spoke to Savio, who's involved in the insurance industry, hearing from her saying how much money these condo owners and these these large condo dwellings are already saving even a day after the governor signed the bill.
Yeah, so rare to see legislation actually making a difference within 24 hours of the governor signing it. A lot of hope that this will stabilize the market. Next week, we will be talking to two folks from the University of Hawaii in various science departments, how federal budget cuts and priorities are making an impact there, what it means for science research and climate impact here in Hawaii. We do hope to see you next week right here on Spotlight Now.
That's right. You can always make sure to tune in and, of course, stream it online. We'll see you right back here next week, Tuesday. Aloha.